Both are there, ma. Why? My theory is boring, eh? We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. We have to see some theory also. You have to bear with me. Okay. Well, let's try to understand certain thing here. Uh, See, the first basic requirement is the routing part we have seen. See, when a device is being identified as a security device, we came across that there are certain basic requirements, which is layer 2 or layer 3 forwarding and basic filtering. So the routing part is what your layer 3 forwarding. When we get into the when we are getting into the transparent mode of placing the firewall, we'll understand how the traffic is going to be handled through the layer 2 header, that we will see. But anyway, the first basic requirement of routing we have seen, the forwarding option we have seen. The second thing is what basic filtering technology, with which the traffic is going to be identified and filtered by your firewall. In our case, it is ASA, right? So, sorry. So what is that going on? So through the help of policies, we will be able to control what traffic is allowed to pass through your firewall and what traffic is not. And we have also seen the significance of the security level and how this is getting changed after you apply the policies on that interface. And we have also seen the significance of global policies. This is what we have seen as of now. So, when we had that discussion with respect to basic requirements for a device to be called as a security device, address translation was the third one. You remember? I hope you guys remember. So, address translation often called as what? NAT. Now, my first question would be, of course, you guys all know network address translation. You would have gone through in your CCNA or CCNP, whichever the training program. Even if you have gone through different training programs, Palo Alto training, or any other product, you have this network address translation topic covered over there as well. My question is, what is NAT and why do we NAT? Why do we need NAT? What and why? Can somebody answer me? Yes, Guru. Okay. Any other explanations from anyone else? Okay. See, what is network address translation or what is address translation? There is an address at network layer which is going to be translated from one to another. So the network layer address, which is nothing but an IP address, is going to be translated from one to another, which is called as network address translation. That's clear, correct? Then why do we have to do this address translation? See, we got into IPv6 in recent days, right? So, of course, when I say recent days, it's not yesterday or day before yesterday. Of course, the development was going on, the implementation was also going on. Most of the large organizations and service providers are ready to work with IPv6 addresses. What was the reason behind it? See, when IPv4 address got developed, they didn't expect. So the address space was 32 bits, and with which we can have 2 to the power of 32 number of IP addresses. So, which is more than enough. They didn't predict this kind of a growth. Now, if you see the current expectation or current utilization of IPv4 addresses, it's almost done. So, of course, while this demand was increasing, people were predicted this one. There wouldn't be sufficient IP addresses for providing identity for different devices. I do remember that. I'm from Chennai. You guys me aware of it, right? So I do remember that for accessing internet. I'm just saying that I think it is 95 or 96. I'm not very sure. While I was studying, I used to pay 300 rupees for 1 hour of internet access, and that too I have to book because there was no browsing centers I have to travel all the way to a different location altogether. It is around 18 to 20 kilometers just for accessing the internet. Right now, think about how we are accessing the internet. We have our internet access through our mobile phone. We have DSLs. We have variety of internet options. Right, you take anything, and earlier days we used to have some specific set of devices like computers. We used to have laptops. We see very rare cases. Now think about what are all the set of devices we have connected to our internet. We have mobile phones connected to internet. We have laptops, tablets, right? And then we also have smart TVs. Apart from that, the smart devices. Apart from that, IoT devices. There are variety of devices. They are getting connected to the internet for the communication, or the public network to the communication, for their communication, right? Now my point is, every device which is trying to get connected to the network supposed to have its own IP address. So due to the huge growth of internet and the number of devices getting connected to the internet, the existing address space IPv4 was not sufficient to give a unique identity for each and every device. To address this one, right? So what they said is, okay, we wanted to come up with something called as what, a private IP address. So internally, within an organization, if you need an IP address, you no need to pay for anyone, because those addresses are reserved addresses. I hope you remember during our first class, the network fundamentals, I asked you the range of what is it called, the private IP addresses. So an RFC 1918 got released, with which they defined a set of IP addresses as a private IP addresses. So the private IP addresses provides an identity for an individual device within a network, and that network is called as a private network. So the point is, your organization can also use the private address space. My company can also use the same address space. If that is the case, how the communication between these two organizations could happen, that gets, the addresses could be duplicated, right? So we don't want that to happen. One. Same way, because this duplication of addresses are possible across multiple organizations, when the traffic needs to be routed to any one of the private IP addresses, it couldn't be possible from the internet, because I don't know who is going to be, which of the network I have to respond back, or which of the network I have to reach. Because private addresses, it could be anywhere and it could be everywhere, right? So how do I know that when I'm trying to reach a specific private IP address, this belongs to company A or company B or company C? There is no possibility at all. So we have to perform the translation. We have to do the translation so that the return traffic can also come back. This is one of the reasons why we have done. Hope you remember that. What is that? According to RFC 1918, what are all the IP addresses or private IP addresses? 10.0.0.0 slash. Okay. Then 172.16.0.0 slash, sorry, slash 16. Then 192.168.0 slash. Anybody wanted to do some sort of changes in this? Is this given addresses are correct, or you want to do some changes on it? So what you are saying, that 172.16.0.0 through subnet mask 16, correct? Is that correct? Okay. How about for 192.168? This is correct, or you want to do some changes on it? Any changes somebody wanted to say? Okay, see, according to RFC 1918, the private IP addresses are a range of IP addresses. Okay, so it's not that a specific network and all. So all of the books, wherever you read, you will have something called as what, the private IP addresses starts from 10.0.0.1 to 10. 172.255.255.255. That's how they used to give. The same way, the 172.16.0.1 to 172.31.255. That's how they used to be giving it. Now, if I'm going to be using all of them as a single network, like what? If I say 8, what I'm saying is correct. When it comes to 172.16, you're trying to apply the default mask for class B, which is not correct. Now, this is a range of IP addresses, right? So, starting from 172.16.0.0 to 172.31.255.255, a range of addresses are there. But then how do you have the subnet mask as 16? If you put subnet mask as 16, it is wrong, because if you are trying to identify the networks individually. But according to the RFC 1918, it is 172.16.0.0/12. It's a summary address. Okay. Same way, 192.168.0.0, it's not /24, it is /16. So whatever you said here is correct, but when you're using the subnet mask, you have to be very sure about the exact subnet mask according to the RFC 1918 is being used. Anyway, so this is your private IP addresses. To use the IP addresses in this range, you no need to take anybody's permission. Your company can also use an IP address from this range. My company can also pick up a network in this range. I can start assigning the IP addresses for the devices. So the problem here is what? People from the external world couldn't reach it. Think of your extension number, your voice over IP, or any kind of a communication which is happening in your internal network. Most of the case it would be VoIP only, but you think about your extension number. Those using that extension number, you could communicate within your organization, but people from the external world couldn't reach you. The same way, even you cannot extend your connection to the external world. So if you wanted to do it, you typically take the help of a PBX. PBX would be responsible for translating that private unregistered extension number to a registered publicly identifiable number. So that's what is happening in your network address translation as well. So these addresses are the private addresses. We wanted to have the communication to the public network. So the return traffic has to come back to me, and by performing the translation, I'll be able to achieve that one. This is reason number one. Reason number two. Most of the case, I have seen that people were saying that the translation is from private to public or public to private. This is the explanation I'm hearing, keep on hearing. But network address translation is not limited between private and public. You can do the translation from private to private, from public to public. It's quite possible. If you wanted to do it, you can do this one. So the address translations could happen from private to public, from public to private, from private to private, from public to public. Now the reason behind this one, when we had the discussion with respect to the different types of attacks on day 2, we have seen threats, attack types, reconnaissance, access, DOS attacks. Hope you remember that. See, even I asked you one thing, right? If a chance is given to you, which type of or which category of attack you will start fighting first. And of course, we also heard that it is a reconnaissance attack. So what is that reconnaissance attack? Reconnaissance is nothing but information gathering. Even by that time, I told you that by default, the firewalls would not be allowing the ICMP traffics to pass through. You remember that? Why? Because ICMP leads to reconnaissance. Right? So one way of hiding your internal identity is through the help of translations. There is a popular saying which is called as security through obscurity. Like by hiding your internal network information, or by hiding your information, you can protect the resource. It's quite possible because the attacker needs to identify the host where the data resides. Only then he'll be able to perform the further attacks, right? So translation provides security for your resources as well. How? By hiding the identity of the resources that you're trying to protect. You're getting my point, right? So translation is nothing but a network layer address is translated from one to another. Point number one. Why translation is required? Because internally we are using the private addresses. While we are going out, the return traffic couldn't come back. So to have the return traffic to be received, we wanted to have a publicly reachable, routable IP address, a network address translation could do that one. Same way, you might have your internal resources which needs to be accessed from the internet. For that also, you will take the help of network address translation. But this is not the only purpose of doing the translation. It's quite possible that if you want to protect your resources, to do that one, you can also start hiding that identity of the resources. By hiding the identity, you're also providing some sort of security to the resources. So, network address translation is not only for reachability purpose, it is also being used for securing the resources. Till this point is clear? Any questions as of now? Okay, good enough. Okay. Now the next thing is, what are all the types of network address translation? What are the types of NAT? Okay. Okay. So static net, dynamic net, and PAT. Okay. Okay. So probably this information might be new for you guys. So NAT is being majorly classified into two. That's all. One is called as unidirectional. The other one is called as bidirectional. Of course, under unidirectional you will have different types of NAT. Under bidirectional you have couple of means you have NAT as well. Means under unidirectional you have certain configurations. Under bidirectional you have certain configuration. When I say unidirectional, the traffic, the request needs to be initiated on a specific direction. I'm not talking about the response. The response would come back, right? What I mean to say, unidirectional, the request always needs to be initiated on a specific direction. Only then the translations could be performed. For example, so from internal to external, so forget about the NAT, we are going to be comparing this one with your access control list or the policies. By default, no rules are configured on ASA firewall, correct? But still, all traffic from higher security level to the lower security level is permitted. Whereas, any traffic from lower security level to the higher security level is denied. Am I right? Now, the point is, when the traffic is going out from the internal network to the external network, the return traffic is also permitted. Am I right? It is not being restricted because of the security level. When no traffic or when no details are seen on the state table, only then what will happen? The rules are going to be verified. So, whatever the request is going out of your internal to external network, the return traffic will also be permitted even though you don't have a respective rule to permit the traffic. That's because of your stateful inspection behavior of your ASA. Am I right? Same way, when I'm talking about unidirection, if the translation is performed on one specific direction, the return traffic is also going to be matched against the detail and the return traffic can come back. Whereas, on the other direction, if the request is going to be initiated, the respective rule needs to be matched. You're getting my point, right? Hello? Is that clear? So, unidirectional NAT means the request needs to be always initiated on a specific direction according to the rule specification. Do you understand what I'm saying? Any questions on this? No. Of which aspect? I'm just talking only about unidirectional. I'm yet to talk about bidirectional. Exactly. Because we have allowed the request to be forwarded out, I would have made an entry in my NAT table. See, what is that happening? Let's see that. Correct. Like your access control list, like your policies, when the request is being permitted to pass through the security device, the return traffic no needs to be matched against the rules because you have the respective entry in your state table. That is with respect to your policies. Am I right? The same way, when I say unidirectional NAT, on one specific direction you perform the translation, the return traffic is not going to be having any problem. I'm talking about the return traffic, not the request is being initiated on the other direction. Let's say that A is trying to access C while the traffic is going out. I'm asking the firewall to translate the A to B. Right? So because of that, when C sees the traffic, it is seeing that C is receiving the request from B. He will reply back to B. Now B is going to be translated. Right? The return traffic is going to be given to system A, because the firewall maintains a table called as what? A state table. The same way, the translation table is also going to be maintained. How a state table is being maintained, the same way NAT table will also be maintained. If I translated while the traffic is going between A to C, I have translated A to B and then forwarded to C. This is called as what? A pre-NAT, and this is called as a post-NAT. These two are going to be bound to each other. So when C is returning back to B, now the C is going to be kept the same, whereas B is translated to A. This is for only the return traffic. You understand what I'm saying? Whereas now C is initiating the traffic. Now where you see the pre-NAT, where you see the details on the pre-NAT. Now C is trying to open up a connection with B, right? Now C to B should have a respective rule, the NAT translation rule on your firewall. Only then the translation can be performed. See, there is a difference between request and response. Am I right or not? When request is being initiated on a specific direction, the return traffic will be permitted. There is no problem at all. If you assume that the traffic is going to be allowed if the request is initiated on the other direction, it is wrong. Right? The same is applicable for the NAT rules also. When unidirectional NAT rules are being configured, the NAT will be performed on the traffic if it is matching a specific rule, and the return traffic will be automatically translated. Return traffic, the response traffic, not the request. Right? Right. Under the unidirectional NAT, we have couple of types like source NAT, destination NAT. Okay. What is a source NAT? As I said earlier, what is network address translation? If the network layer address is going to be translated from one to another, which is called as network address translation. Now, when I say source NAT, if I translate the source address, which is called as a source NAT. If I translate the destination address, then I call it as a destination NAT. Think from the request perspective, not from the response perspective. Okay. If the source address is being translated on the request, then it is called as a source NAT. If the destination address is being translated on the request, then it is called as destination NAT. Is that clear? Okay. Now, when do we go for source NAT? Typically, your internal network will be in private IP segment, right? Your internal network will be in private IP segment. When you are trying to access the external resources, by that time, we go for source NAT. So, you have your internal network and people are trying to access the external network. By that time, the source address gets translated. Same way, you have your services hosted in your internal network, and these services needs to be accessed from the external network. By that time, we go for destination NAT. Is this clear? Okay. Okay. Now the bidirectional NAT, whenever you're talking about bidirectional NAT, a static one-to-one mapping is going to be happening. For example, if I have an IP address 172.16.1.10 is mapped to 1.1.1.1. So 172.16.1.10 is connected to my internal network and 1.1.1.1 is the public IP, right? Now when I do one-to-one mapping, it is not going to be a unidirectional. I call this as a bidirectional. That means any request initiated by 172.16.1.10 going external world, the source address will be translated to 1.1.1.1. Same way, any traffic initiated on the external network and it is given to 1.1.1.1, then it will be translated to 172.16.1.10. Do you understand? Is this clear? Okay, see, most of the time people used to say that VPN is one of the complicated content, but I would say that there are variety of NAT concepts. If you can understand them well, then you can say that you will be saying that, okay, NAT is going to be considered as the complicated content in any of the firewall. Right? So when I started my career with Cisco, of course, I felt that NAT is very simple, but the moment I migrate myself to different vendor products, because that is my exposure actually. I don't say that those kind of translations are not there with Cisco, but that's kind of exposure I'm saying that. So once I got into a different vendor product, I got to know that the NATs, what and all we can do with this NAT and how this NAT can be configured. A variety of NAT configurations and variety of NATs were there. It was very difficult to understand as well initially, right? Anyway, fine. Probably for a couple of people, NAT might be simple, VPN might be complicated. For a couple of them, VPN might be simple, whereas NAT could be complicated. Anyway, fine. So, bidirectional NAT, when do you go for bidirectional NAT? As I said earlier, source NAT is a unidirectional NAT. We always go with the source NAT when you want to permit the internal resources or internal users to access the external network. When do we go for a destination NAT? You have your internal services and you want the services to be accessible from the external world, then you will perform destination NAT. You understand what I'm saying? Now the question is, what is the situation you wanted to go for this static NAT, which is bidirectional? Most of the time I have seen that people will simply start doing the static NAT when they have the internal servers and they wanted to use a public IP address to be mapped so that can be accessible from the internet or through the internet. Is this the right way of doing it? Destination NAT can help you to do that one. Am I right? If you have internal servers and you want them to be you wanted them to be accessible from the internet, then you will go for destination NAT. Then what is the need of static NAT or bidirectional NAT? Anyone? Okay, fine. Let me explain you this one. Let me put the diagram so that you will be able to understand. So I have my 172.16.1.10. Internally, I have my server. Then it is connected to external network, and here I have an IP address. I have received a public IP address. So this 1.1.1.1 can be mapped to 172.16.1, 1.10, correct? Am I right? This is what. But my question is, I can have this to be achieved using the destination NAT. Like any traffic initiated from the external world, the source IP address can be anything, right? And the destination IP address is 1.1.1.1. I can simply translate the destination IP address from 1.1.1.1 to 172.16.1.10. So the services are accessible through the internet. Am I right? But my question is, if this can be achieved through the destination NAT, then why do you need a bidirectional NAT? Because destination NAT is a unidirectional. What would be the situation where we can get into the bidirectional NAT? Anything is triggering? Okay, let me tell you something here. Atos or your existing company, think about which are all the locations you have companies or you have your offices. Let's say I have an office in India. I also have an office in UK, right? I also have an office in US. Of course, we should have an office in US as well, right? Okay, you have multiple offices in different countries. My point is, every user is going to be every user is going to be given with a mail address through which the communication within the organization can happen, right? So users of India will have a mail address. Of course, every user of UK will also be having a mail address. US employees will also be having a mail address. Now, where you are keeping your mail address, mail servers. Now, current scenario, you can keep it in cloud and then you can have a dedicated data center, all those things, quite possible. But my point is, let me keep the mail servers in India. If I keep the mail servers in India, now what happens? Every user in UK, when they are trying to send an email to US, it will go to server which is there in India, then it will go, this is going to be accessible to US employees. So when UK user is trying to send an email to US employee, the mail is going to be stored in India mail server, because that's the only mail server we have, and that's mails are going to be accessible by the US employee. Again, the US employee, when he is replying back for the mail, the request coming from this guy, and it will again stored in what? The mail server which is there in my India data center. Now this UK employee will be in a position to access this email or not? Yes, he can do that one, right? Now assume that there is a 10 MB of file being attached and then transmitted, and the communication is repeatedly happening, or the replies are going on, some sort of communication, it's prolonging. Think about how many times the mail reply will be having that attachment, and that email is going to be sent from UK to India mail server, because that's the only mail server we have it. Same way, when US guy is trying to access that email, every time he is accessing, the 10 MB of file is going to be downloaded. You understand? Assume if I'm going to be sending a mail to a group of people from UK to US or US to UK, then again, every time while I'm sending, that is going to be stored in the mail server. Assume that UK people, there are 500 employees who are accessing that email, and when they are accessing the email, an individual copy of the mail attachment is going to be downloaded to every user. Do you think this is a perfect solution? No. So what I'm trying to do here is, I'm planning to have a mail server in each and every location. So I have a mail server in India, I have a mail server in UK, I also have a mail server in US. Now what happens, I wanted to have the synchronization between all of the mail servers. That means when UK employee is trying to send an email to US employee, his mail will be sent to the UK email server, and then the synchronization is going to be happening from the UK mail to US mail server. Now the users of US mail server, they just need to access it. In this case, when UK employee is sending a file attachment of 10 MB for 500 users, only one synchronization is going to be happening from UK to US. Right? The US employees, they are going to be downloading the mail directly from the mail server which is available in their location. In this case, what is that we are trying to understand? The servers could initiate a connection. At the same time, the servers could also be receiving the synchronization request. Am I right or not? If you have a web server, right, we know that always it will receive the request and it will respond for the request. May not be the web server will be initiating any connection request, just for our understanding, right? So here in mail server, it is quite possible that the server could also initiate a connection, and also it could receive the request from the other servers as well as from the users. You understand what I'm saying? And this is the situation where you have to take the help of bidirectional NAT. Is that clear? Any questions on this? Okay. So don't simply suggest static NAT or a bidirectional NAT when you have a server which is not at all going to be initiating a request from internal to the external world. Internal to internal location, you don't need to perform the translation. Then you simply allow the traffic to pass through, right? So that's the situation, we'll go for it. Now, this is the NAT types. Let's say that we have seen unidirectional NAT, we have seen source NAT and destination NAT. In bidirectional, we have one type of NAT called as what? Static NAT. Is that the only thing we have it in, what is it called, in bidirectional category? We can also take the help of something called as twice NAT. we will see that little later. We will finish off certain configurations and then we will get into the twice NAT as well. Any questions you have, you can ask me first before I go to the configuration part. Correct. Twice NAT we yet to see. Or you are expecting some other NAT discussion? There are so many, ma. There are so many. You may not say that because we are into operations, you are doing this one, but it is quite possible that in your company also there might be a team called as engineering team or integration team or solutions team, right? They will propose a different solutions for different customers. If you are into system integration side, you need to understand the customer requirement and then you may need to suggest certain things. What you're saying, I agree. To certain extent, I agree. Most of the time, we do this kind of, what is that, source NAT, destination NAT. This is what we basically do it. Okay? Sorry? Yes, correct. What you're saying is correct. I hope we have saved the configuration earlier. The initial configurations we have saved, right? I guess so. Yes. Oh, okay. We didn't allow the ping, right? I don't know what configuration I have. Let me clear the configuration. The access control list on my ASA. It will take little time to boot up. In the meanwhile, I'll try to connect to R2 and also with the, who's this? Mahesh, I think I told you, right? I didn't do any theory yesterday. Yes. Why do we have to record it? Because participants were doing their exercises. No. I didn't do any demonstrations and all. Because those demos and all over, right? I have given you certain exercises to complete it. That's all. So if they stuck somewhere, I asked them to report that issue. Okay, 1.1.1.1, then ASA. Okay, there are certain access list. I'm just going to be clearing that. Configure terminal, clear configured access group, then clear configured access list. Right, I don't have anything now. Right, so route, I can see all directly connected. And also I think I have enabled HTTP over here. Should run section HTTP. Yeah, I have enabled all of that. I no need to worry about it. Now my point is, from this internal PC, if I try to open up the what is it called, the web service, would I be in a position to gain access to it or not? So 1.1.1.1, I hope you remember it was prompting for the username and password. When we gave the username and password, we have seen some different privilege levels in our previous class, not previous class, day before yesterday class. One dot 1.1.1, when we are trying to access, we were able to access it. Now why it's not accessible now? Let's see that. there is no route for the return traffic. Let's say IP route 10.1.1.0 255.255.255.0 1.1.1.2. I just added this route. After adding this, if I try to gain access, I should be in a position to right. So I think user1 and user1 is the username and password. Not sure what is the username and password. You remember what is the username and password I have given? No, there is no usernames at all. So username user1, privilege 15, password user1, AAA authentication, AAA new model, AAA authentication for login HTTP default, AAA authentication for login only, right? Yes, login default local TP authentication using the local database. Right, now user1, then user1. I'm trying to open up a connection just to confirm that. Yeah, you remember that? This is what we have seen on that day. Now my point is, if I remove the route, right, so on my router 3, assuming that I'm going to be removing that router, the moment I remove this route, I wouldn't be in a position to access them, correct? Why I'm not able to access it? Because there is a problem in the return route. Now how do we solve this problem? We wanted to have a web-based communication with the router 3 from this internal machine. So you have to add the static route, or you have to add the route for 10.1.1.0 network so that the return traffic can come back. Now without adding the route for the internal network, we should be in a position to access or gain access to the web service. How we can do this? We can perform the translations on the ASA device. When it is going out, I wanted to do some sort of a translation so that the return traffic can come back to the ASA, right? So without adding a route, we should gain access to it. When it comes to the configurations within your Cisco ASA, you can do the configuration either using object, or we can also do some manual NAT. We categorize the configurations with respect to ASA as two types of configuration. One is called as an automatic NAT, the other one is called as a manual NAT. When I say automatic NAT rules are going to be generated based on the configuration within your object. See, when you do the configurations within an object, a specific NAT rule is going to be generated under the NAT rule section, right, under the NAT rule area. If you wanted to perform some manual NAT, then you can also add a specific NAT rule. That is also possible. But the thing is, regardless of it, okay, again, I'm just going back to my whiteboard to explain certain things. So according to the NAT configuration, we know that we can do an automatic NAT or manual NAT. Why they are called as automatic NAT or manual NAT? Because as we have the access rule section, we also going to be having a NAT rule section within the configuration. So the NAT rule sections are going to be populated by the rules. How the rules are going to be created in the NAT rule section defines the type of NAT what we are doing. If the NAT rules are going to be populated automatically, then it is called as an automatic NAT rule. If the NAT rules are going to be created on the NAT rule section manually, then it is called as manual NAT rule. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, how the NAT rules can be generated automatically? Because the automatic NAT rule or automatic NAT is going to be configured within object. The rules gets populated automatically on the NAT rule section, and since we are doing the NAT configuration within the object, we call this as object-based NAT. Whereas the manual NAT, as I said earlier, the rules are going to be created manually on the NAT rule section. We call this as a manual NAT. But there is one thing. It doesn't matter what type of NAT rule it is, the NAT rules are going to be processed in the sequential order as like an access control list or the policies. Is that clear? So we have automatic NAT rules and we also have manual NAT rules. These automatic NAT rules are going to be populated because of the configurations that we do within the object, and we call this as an object NAT or automatic NAT. Whereas manual NAT rules can be created by the administrator, configured by the administrator, and because of that we call it as a manual NAT. One thing, it doesn't matter whether you have an automatic NAT rule or manual NAT rule. Basically, the NAT rules are going to be used for performing the translation. Which rule will be used? Whichever the rule first matches, accordingly the translation will be performed. Till this point is clear? Because I have to do something else as well now. Any clarifications on this? Hope nothing is there. Okay. Now, the question is, where will be your NAT rules and where will be your manual NAT rules? The automatic NAT rules and all of them are going to be in NAT rule section only. There is no confusions on that. But which rule is going to be positioned top? See, the NAT rule section has been categorized or divided into 3 sections. So section 1, section 2 and section 3. The NAT rules are going to be comprised of, NAT rule section is going to be comprised of rules with which the translations are going to be performed. When you have multiple rules, based on which rule the translation will be performed? Based on the first match, right? So the NAT rule section has been divided into 3 sections. NAT rule part or the NAT rules are being divided into 3 sections. Section 1, section 2 and section 3, and the section 2 is reserved for automatic NAT or automatic NAT rules. That means you cannot position the automatic NAT rules on top of this section or on after this section. That means section 2 is exclusively reserved for automatic NAT rules. When it comes to the manual NAT rule, you have the option of placing them in section 1 or in section 2. Is that clear? Any questions as of now? Not clear. Okay. Now let me say like this. Is that clear that what is automatic NAT and what is manual NAT? Is that clear? Okay. What is automatic NAT? The rules are going to be populated into the NAT rule section automatically, which is called automatic NAT. Whereas if the rules are going to be configured manually by an administrator, those are called as manual NAT. Correct? Now, automatic NAT rules and manual NAT rules is only for our understanding when it comes to processing. Every rule is going to be part of the NAT rule section. My point is, which rule will be matched first? That's the question. Whichever the rule matches against the received packet, accordingly the translation will be performed. Is that clear? Okay. Now, if you want to take control on it, what rule has to be matched first, you may need to move the rules up and down accordingly. Like your access control is. That's how we were doing it. But there are certain restrictions. What is that restriction? The NAT rule section has 3 sections into it. Right? I told you that section number 1, and section number 2 and section number 3. Whether you have rules in section 1 or section 2 or section 3 doesn't matter. That's a different story. But the 3 sections are always there. So if you have populated couple of rules in section 1 and section 2 and section 3, when the traffic is received by the ASA firewall and it is checking the translation rules area, which section will be matched first? Section 1. Still confusing? See, assume this as an access control list. Why we need access control list? We wanted to permit the traffic or deny the traffic. How that is going to be decided? Based on the access rules. How the access rules are going to be populated? Manually by an administrator. We don't have a choice. But which rule will be matched? Whichever the rule first matches against the received packet, whatever the action associated to that rule, that will be taken, correct? Now we are talking about the NAT rules. Then the purpose of the NAT rule is to perform the translation. It is not going to be permitted or denied. That is not going to be done through the help of NAT rules. So how the translation is going to be performed? According to the NAT rules within your NAT rule area. But how the NAT rules are going to be populated? Either through automatically or through manually. Regardless of that, which rule is going to be matching first, accordingly the translation is going to be happening. Whether you have created the rule because of the object net or administrator has manually created rule, it doesn't matter. Whichever the rule first matches against the received packet, whatever the translation that you have asked the firewall to perform it, it will be done. Right. Now my question is, since we have two rules, which is that automatic rule and manual NAT rule, which will be positioned at top? Because automatic NAT rule, we don't have any control to be done on the NAT rule section, because we are doing the configuration within the object. Because of that, the rule is going to be populated in NAT rule section. You understand? Yes, we are doing the changes within the object, but the rules gets created automatically. Right? So if you want to do some changes on the NAT rule, you cannot do it on the rule section. You have to do it under the objects. Whatever the changes you do under the objects, the respective changes are going to be reflected within your automatic NAT rules area. Right? But if you wanted to take control on something, you want to have certain control. So if I'm going to be having only two sections, and one section is for automatic NAT and another section for manual NAT, because we don't have any control on the automatic NAT, after automatic NAT rules are processed, only then the manual NAT rules will be verified. Or if I keep manual NAT rule section first and automatic NAT rule sections second one, then after processing all the manual rules, only then the automatic NAT rules are going to be evaluated. Am I right? But you want to have certain control. I want to have certain manual rules to be processed first, and then automatic, and then certain manual rules. I would like to position the rules according to my requirement. So the NAT rule section has been divided into three. Section 1, Section 2 and Section 3. Section 2 has been reserved totally for automatic NAT rules, where administrator cannot go and edit the rules manually. Right? Manual NAT rules, administrators are given choice of saying what? Okay, this rule I want to keep it in Section 1. This rule I want to keep it in Section 3. But I don't have an option to say Section 2. You understand what I'm saying? So once you have populated the rules and positioned the rule according to your requirement, the rules are going to be processed in sequence against the received packet. There is no difference on that. Got it? Okay. Now let me show you certain things and then we will get into this. I think I have some problem. Okay. Now, I have removed the route from my R3. Because of that, I was not able to access R3 via my browser. Am I right? This is where we are. Now, I just wanted to perform the translations on my ASA so that R3 could be accessible from my PC, internal PC. How do I do it? First of all, we just need to create the object. Let's start seeing certain things called as what? Object net first. So, show net. If there is anything? Show run NAT. I don't have any NAT rules. Do you see that? Am I seeing anything? Show NAT is not showing anything. Show run NAT is not showing anything. Now what I do, I just wanted to create an object for the resource which is going to be used as certain things within my NAT rule section. So basically what I want is, when it comes to the address translation, I have to identify the IP addresses which needs to be translated. The same way I have to identify the IP addresses which with which the translation is going to be performed. Basically, pre-NAT and post-NAT IP addresses I have to identify. You understand what I'm saying? See, I have to identify what needs to be translated to what it has to be translated to. So this is your pre-NAT IP and this is your post-NAT IP. Often we say that this is a real IP and this is a mapped IP. Is that clear? So we have to identify both of them through the help of an object. We do that one first. Now in our case, I have my internal network that has to be translated to something. Let's say object. You remember that object? I can do anything, object network. Let me call this as LAN 10. I have given a name as what? 10.1.1.0. Here the network object is going to be 10.1.1.0 with mask of 255.255.255. Is that clear? Then I would like to create another object. I'm just creating an individual host. I can do that one again. Of course, I can also do that one with the object group as well. R3 1. The type has to be defined. Then I have something called as what? Network object. Network is host 1.1.1.1. Okay, I have to do the translation, right? Using what IP address I'm going to be translating. I can do the translation using different IP address, but still for that I need to have the request. Okay, first I'll do interface based translation and then I'll explain you what is that going to be happening. See what I'm saying, that when the traffic is initiated from the internal network and going out via my egress interface, I need to have an IP address, right? So that IP address, I'm just going to be defining it as an individual IP address. I'm sorry. Network object host 1.1.1.2. This is my external interface IP address, an individual IP address. Now I just need to perform the translation. To do that one, I'm getting into the object called as LAN. See, do I have a NAT keyword or not? I have a NAT keyword. NAT. Now I'll be able to say I'm trying to perform the translation within the object. When I say this NAT to be performed, I need to say what is your source interface and what is your egress interface. Means between these two interfaces the translations are going to be performed. In this, inside is my incoming interface, outside is my outgoing interface. What I mean to say, if the traffic is flowing between inside and outside, consider inside as your receiving traffic or the real IP, whatever you call it as. You understand what I'm saying? Outside is the interface where the traffic is going to be sent to. Do you understand what I'm saying? Might be a little confusing. Now what I have to do is, what type of NAT I'm going to be doing is, it's a source NAT I'm doing it. What type of source NAT? This is going to be a dynamic NAT. To which of the IP addresses I wanted to. The source IP address is going to be identified through the help of LAN underscore 10.1.1.0. This is the name of the object, and then the outgoing interface can be used as the translated IP address. But anyway, I have created the same IP address using another object, which is R3 underscore 1.1.1.1. Sorry, 1.1.1. That's the object name, right? 1.1.1.1. And then what is that I have to do? Nothing else I have to do. See what happens now. What happened? Overlaps with outside interface IP. Okay, then I'll remove this one and then say interface outside. Right? Now what happens now? Can you see this one? NAT inside comma outside. I'm saying that when the traffic is flowing between these two interfaces, inside interface and outside interface, do the translation of type called as source, dynamically translate the whole internal network to the external interface IP address. You understand what I'm saying? Is this clear? See, what is that happening? NAT inside outside, the source is going to be translated dynamically. The source address is 10.1.1.0 translated to the egress interface IP address. What is my egress interface? Outside interface IP address. Is that clear? Because we are doing dynamically, right? The mapping is going to be dynamically done. Is that statically we are mapping it? The address translation, while it is going on, oh, Jashwant is asking me to accept it. 1 minute. Are we doing a static one-to-one mapping between the IP addresses? I don't know what is happening for him. 1 minute. Sridhar is also joining again. So obviously that is going to be dynamically mapped, right? Am I right or not? See that. Only we created two objects only. Instead of that object being referred as the translated IP address, I said interface IP address is going to be used for the translation. Whatever the IP address has been configured on the outside interface will be used for translating the IP addresses identified using LAN underscore 10.1.1.0 object. Right? Sorry? It is not. It is not. Yes. 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 See what is that we have done? Oh, I think I made a mistake. This is not the object net. Okay. I did this one from the global configuration mode. Anyway, since I have done this one, I will explain you this. Show net. See that which section the rule is added to. We know that there are three sections: section 1, section 2 and section 3. Section 1 is for manual net, not for automatic net. Section 2 is only for automatic net, not for manual net. Section 3 is also going to be for manual net. If I see any entry because of the command on the section 1, did I configure an automatic net? No, I configured manual net. Okay. Now again, I'm just getting into the object group network LAN underscore 10.1.1.0. You see that there is an object group we have created. That is that object network. Oh, that's VLAN 10, huh? Not VLAN. What is the name of the object we have created? You remember that? This is correct only, right? Then why it's not showing? Okay. Object network VLAN 10. Okay. Now I'm just going to be performing the NAT within this. Okay, NAT within this. I'm just saying what? Inside. What else options I have it? Can you see this one? Simply saying NAT source dynamic. Any of the object groups I just wanted to specify, I can do that. I should also be having certain options to do this one. The source address is, I'm inside the object only, right? Okay, then interface. No, still this is not. I think I'm doing some mistake. Object network VLAN 10. Okay, now what is that I'm trying to do? NAT side outside dynamic. Source is going to be my If I do this one, this is going to be creating the rules under the section 1. Give me a minute. Let me do it via GUI, and then we can find the respective command line for that. Let me do that. Oh, I have another session already running on it. Let me open up the connection via ASDM. Hope you're able to see me, right? The full screen. This is 10.1.2.1. Then username is Cisco. Password is, I think so. What is the password I set? I don't remember it. Username is Cisco and the password is Disco. That's the password. Username and password I configured. Okay, I'm just getting into the configuration section now. Okay. I'm not going to be doing anything here. Java version, ISDM identity certificate visa. Okay, fine. Enrollment succeeded and then finish. Okay. Okay. Now what I need is, I just wanted to see the objects, right? Objects area. I'm just getting into the firewall section. Then I'll be having the NAT rules as well. See, there is no NAT rules associated over here, right? Then if I start creating certain things, like what, the moment I start configuring the NAT within the object, these sections are going to be populated with automatic NAT rule. But when I'm trying to add a manual NAT rule, you can see that, see here, add NAT rule before the network object NAT rules, which is an automatic, add network object NAT rule, or add NAT rule after the network object rule. That means this is my section 2, this is my section 1, and this is my section 3. If I have to create a rule within your NAT rule section, that can be automatic if I do the configuration within the object. So I'm just getting into the network object NAT rule. Do I have an object already created? I think I have that one. Give me a minute. Let me check. Okay. My objects are not being shown to me. I think I closed it, right, yesterday or day before yesterday. Device list, navigation, addresses. I go to this network addresses. See, this is where I have my VLAN 10. I also have, where is that LAN? That object is not there. Here it is. Network object groups. I go there. This is the object group that I have created, right? So whereas the objects what I have created is VLAN 10, you see this one. Okay, now I'm just getting into the NAT section. Can you see add automatic address translation rules? The moment I check, I'll get the other options as well. Like if it is going to be static, the set of options are going to be different, and this is going to be dynamic path or dynamic. Let me say dynamic path is what I'm trying to do it. The translated address is going to be my outside interface IP address. Okay. My goodness. See, outside interface IP address. So 10.1.1.0 is going to be dynamically translated, the dynamic path, and then say OK. The respective NAT rules are going to be created. But if you wanted to check what is the respective command which is going to be populated? We will see that one in two different ways. Now let me apply the changes. Once I apply the changes, the respective configuration has been pushed. You can see that on your CLI as well as on your GUI. Right? How the object has been created? See that under the VLAN 10, we configured NAT any outside. The dynamic is going to be the NAT any is nothing but any interface can be the source of incoming traffic. Outside in my outgoing traffic, dynamic translation is going to be done, which is going to be using my interface as my translated IP address. Do you understand what I'm saying? Show NAT is going to be showing you there is a section 2. Under that section 2, I have only one rule, which is saying that it can be any incoming interface to outside interface. The source of the address, because we are doing this on VLAN 10, is getting translated to interface IP address. Is that clear? Maybe a little confusing. I hope so. See, when I gave the show run NAT command, it is showing there is something called as NAT has been configured under the objects area. Which object we have selected? It is VLAN 10. Under this VLAN 10, we are saying that do the NAT. The incoming interface can be anything. That's what we have done here. See, 10.1.1.0 dynamic part we are doing it. The source interface can be anything, right? That's what we have done under the object. So the incoming interface can be any. The outgoing interface is going to be my outside, right? The type of translation is going to be dynamic. Because we are doing this configuration from VLAN 10, the source is going to be VLAN 10 and translated to the interface IP address. Which interface is the egress interface? Outside interface is my egress interface. And this is the configuration you are seeing under the running configuration. The respective NAT rule is going to be seen via show NAT command. You are having something called as what? One rule under section 2. The section 2 is meant for automatic NAT. It says that the incoming interface can be anything. The outgoing interface has to be outside. And if the source is matching as VLAN 10, dynamically those addresses are going to be translated to the outgoing interface IP address. Does it make sense? Okay. Now, is there any translation as of now happening? No, nothing. Now, let's try to generate some traffic from my internal PC. Let's say this is going to be 1.1.1.1. We should be in a position to gain access. See, user 1, user 1. But we don't have a route for 10.1.1.0. Correct? Now come here, then say show NAT. You can see there are certain hit counts. What IP addresses are being translated? Show xlate, where you will be able to see the translation. See, TCP path from any, that means the traffic is 10.1.1.10. The source port number is 49243 to the outside interface IP address 1.1.1.2. Whereas the same way the return traffic is coming from 10.1. It is getting translated, right? 10.1.1.10 is getting translated to 1.1.1.10. So 10.1.1.10 could be any part of my internal interfaces, right? That's what any. It is getting translated to outside IP address 1.1.1.2. The source port 49243, it is being still used the same thing. Hope you understand what I'm saying. Yes, it is, because the ASA firewall is intelligent enough to understand when you are mapping multiple IP addresses to a single IP address, we cannot do one-to-one mapping. Dynamic one IP to one IP mapping is not going to be happening. So automatically the path is going to be added. It is coming from your PIX era. When you map a single IP address, the overload function is going to be happening. You don't need to specifically add the keyword called as overload, which you do with your Cisco iOS based devices. Is it understandable? Or any clarification? You want me to explain once again? I will explain you. No. Not because the object has been created. We have done the NAT configuration on object. Okay. Now, if you go to that ASDM, now let's remove that object section. We don't want this object section. Now I'm going to be creating a NAT rule above the object NAT. Now I have the option of specifying the source interface and destination interface. Do you see this one? When I start working with object NAT, I don't have an option of saying which on ASDM. I don't have an option of saying what? The internal interface and the external interface. The moment I go for the NAT rule, manual NAT rule, I have the option of saying inside interface is my source, outside interface is my destination. Okay, or let's go to the DMZ by this time. Okay, source interface is my inside, my destination interface is the DMZ. The source address is my internal network. It could be my object LAN.10.1.1.0, right? The destination address could be anything. The service could also be anything. Now I'm going to be performing a dynamic path, or even I can say that the dynamic address. When I say dynamic address, you just need to mention the IP addresses that you wanted to translate it from one to another. Understand what I'm saying? What needs to be translated to? The translated address range, I need to have it. So I'm creating another object for here, network object. Let's say this is going to be 10.1. DMZ translated. That's the name I'm giving it. Here 10.1.100. It's not a host, it's a network. It's a range. Let's say 10.1.1.100.1 to 10.1.100.10. So this is the what I'm creating it, and this object I'm going to be using it as the translated IP. See, this is the original packet. The original packets are matched using certain criteria like inside and outside interface. I mean the incoming interface and outgoing interface. In this case, I said the incoming interface is inside, the outgoing interface is DMZ. That means if the traffic is flowing between these two, confirm that the source address falls under this object, the destination falls under so object. Now I wanted to perform the dynamic NAT. The source address of LAN 10.1.1.0 gets translated to DMZ translated object. I'm not translating the destination address. You understand? I'm not translating the destination address. If I wanted to go for a path pool translated address, I can do that one, but I'm not doing anything in this. Now say okay. Now can you see that one where the DAT rule has been created now? Under the source, under the section 1. Yeah, one more thing, you can also see one setup, right? See, I have an option to enable preview commands before sending them to the device. Say okay. Once I do this one, if I apply, see, we know that there are two different operating systems, one for GUI and one for CLI. The configurations, whatever you do on GUI is going to be translated into a commands, and then it will be forwarded to the ASA. Now what commands are going to be sent? You can preview it after I enable option. Can you see this one? Object network DMZ underscore translated. This is what we have created. Range is 10.1.100.1 to 10.1.100.10. And then the NAT command has been given. NAT inside comma DMZ. Right? The source is dynamic. Then LAN is going to be my internal source. The destination, the source address is going to be translated to the translated object 10.1.100.1 to 10.1.100.10. This is the command which will be sent. You see, notice the same commands over there. Show NAT. You see there will be two sections now. Under section 1, I have one rule. Under section 2, I have one rule. Section 2 is because of the automatic NAT. Section 1 is because of the manual NAT. We said that inside to DMZ, source address 10.1.1.0 is going to be dynamically translated to the DMZ translated object. The DMZ translated object has a range of IP address starting from 10.1.100.1 ending to 10.1.100.10. But the point is here what route I have on R2, check it out. I have only one single route, right? Do you think you will be able to gain access to R2 router? I don't have, it's there. Wait a minute. I'll try to. Username R2, privilege 15, password R2. Right, then IP HTTP authentication using local database. Fine. If I try to access 172.16.1.2, do you think I'll be able to access it? Are you sure? The NAT rule is going to be translating the internal 10.1.1.0 segment to 10.1.100. something. Do R2 knows about how to reach 10.1.100? Do R2 knows about it? Then obviously you will not get it. Let's see here, and then let's try to refresh. See from which IP address you are getting the request. The request is coming from 10.1.100.2 to the destination of 172.16.1.2. Now when it is it would try to reply, it wouldn't be, because there is no routing table entry. Now what I have to do is I just need to add a static route, IP route, to 10.1.100.0 with a mask of 255.255.0. I'm just sending it to my firewall 1.1. After adding this entry, then I try to reload, I'll be able to see the access. Correct? Is this clear? Okay. So if you have any questions, you can ask me. Right. Correct. What you're asking is very valid question. Now the thing is, what are the key differences between automatic NAT and manual NAT? Automatic NATs are so simple to configure. Manual NAT, little bit difficult to configure. But with automatic NAT, simply you can perform certain types of translation. You will not be able to do majority of the translations, or if you wanted to perform some policy based translations, you will not be able to do it with an automatic NAT. Automatic NAT is simple to configure, right? So it's very limited steps that you have to do it, and it will be simple, but it is not granular. And you want to take the help of something like what if the traffic is coming from this source to that destination for this particular service, I wanted to do this kind of a translation. It's not possible with object NAT. Then why do you need object NAT? See, certain NATs wouldn't require all the complicated information to be fed in to perform or to configure it. You're getting my point, right? See, from internal to external, we simply need to do a dynamic path. Is that not enough? So why do you want to configure all the parameters while you are trying to do the NAT translations? You can do that. I am not at all denying that. But when you take a manual NAT, you would have noticed the multiple parameters that got enabled automatically. See here. Right, see, if I open up this under the NAT section, how much configuration I have to do? What type of NAT? If it is dynamic or what else I'm doing it here? That's the maximum I have to do it, right? Whereas if I go for manual NAT rule, by default multiple things are going to be enabled. You must be knowing about between which interfaces, what is the source, what would be the destination. You couldn't do that. You understand? See, certain things needs to be so simple because that NAT itself is simple. But in certain cases, for example, let's say this, I'm just taking the whiteboard now. Assume that you have two servers here and both of them are web servers. This is a web server, this is also a web server. I have 172.16.1.10. I also have 172.16.1.20 and these two are connected through my firewall. Okay. Now both the services, both the web services needs to be accessible through the internet. How do you do that one? I need to have a separate IP address. For 1.1.1.1 is mapped to 172.16.1.10, whereas 1.1.1.10 or 1.1.1.2 is mapped to 172.16.1.10. You can do that one. But when you have multiple services, and you may need to take those many IP addresses for it. In this case, if you're going for your object NAT, mapping them statically is not going to be a complicated thing for you. But what my question is, I have a single IP address 1.1.1.1, but I wanted to identify multiple services. How do I do it? I can statically go and say this is going to be 23, right? If the traffic is coming to 23, send it to a specific server. If the traffic is coming to 80, then send it to a different server altogether. If the traffic is coming to 443, send it to a different server. Even I can say that if the traffic is coming to 8080, then send it to a different server. You understand what I'm saying? And we can also say if the traffic is coming from 10.1.1.0 and going to DC, I want to perform a different translation. If the traffic is coming from 10.1.1.0 going to a partner site 1, I want to perform a different translation. If the traffic is coming from 10.1.1.0, if it is going to a vendor, then I would like to go for a different IP translation. Can I do that one with the simply object NAT? No. But then you might be asking the question what you asked, then why do we need object NAT? Object NAT is simple, right? Exactly. So not on all the cases we need all this complicated information or multiple parameters needs to be fed in for doing the NAT configuration. Whenever you wanted to take control more on how the traffic needs to be translated, then you get into the manual NAT. If not, simply start using object NAT, which is more than enough. Does it make sense? Okay. Yes. I think I have answered this question. Yes, I already answered your question, but still, anyway, see, if I have only two sections, section 1 and section 2, where do you keep manual NAT and where do you want to keep your automatic NAT? It's your choice. You decide. You tell me. Section 1, you wanted to keep manual NAT or automatic? Okay, manual NAT. Then section 2, you're going to be having automatic NAT. Correct? Now, see, there are certain NAT configuration. I mean, the rules are going to be processed in the same sequential order. It doesn't matter it's a manual NAT or automatic NAT. If you have all complicated NAT rules and more granular control you wanted to take in, and few of the object NATs and few of the configurations are simple NAT, then automatically what will happen? The automatic NAT rules are going to be in section 2 anyway, but there will be few rules, whereas the manual NAT rules you will be having more. Right? So after matching, for every new connection, after matching the manual NAT, it will come to the automatic NAT. There will be delay, right? So what I'm trying to say is, I would like to put some object NATs under my section 2, right? The number of rules can be minimum or maximum, doesn't matter. But if I would like to override anything on my object NAT rule, I'll keep my manual NAT rule on top of it. If that is not matching and section 2 is not matching, yes. If you want to override something of your automatic NAT, keep the rules on section 1. If not, the simple NAT rules are going to be in the section 2. If that is also not matching, only then the granular rules which are there on the section 3 will be used. In that way, you can align your rules in a proper place so that it can be matched as soon as the packet has been received. That's the logic behind it. Yes. Okay. No, wait, I'll come there. Right. Now what happens? You have a rule for 10.1.1.0 to be translated to, let's say 1.1.1.1. It's a simple rule that you have created. Of course, a dynamic path is going on here. Okay? Is this understandable for you or not? We did an object NAT from 10.1.1.0 is going to be translated to 1.1.1.1. Very simple to do it. Now, I have a requirement that 10.1.1.0, when it goes to the data center, I want this to be translated to a specific IP address 1.1.1.10. How do you do it? If you're keeping this in manual NAT rule, section 2, this rule will match first or this rule will match first? Then automatically 10.1.1.0 will be translated to 1.1.1.1 only. Even though you have this NAT rule in section 2, it is not at all going to be matched. That's why I told you, automatic NAT rules, if you want to override any of the automatic NAT rule, keep the manual NAT rule on top of it, the respective manual NAT rule. Now I can create a manual NAT stating what 10.1.1.0 to DC, I will translate it to 1.1.1.10. Now this rule will be positioned on top of automatic, then any traffic from 10.1.1.0 going to DC, this rule will match. Accordingly, the translations are going to be performed. Clear? If this rule is not matching, then automatic NAT rule says that source is 10.1.1.0, translate this to 1.1.1.1. That's it. Any other questions? One minute, please. ஹலோ, எங்கள் நேற்றே நான் சொன்னேன் நான் வேலையாக இருப்பேன், காலையில் நான் கூப்பிட்றேன்னு சொன்னேன். இத்தனை தடவை கால் பண்ணிங்கன்னா என்ன அர்த்தம்? எனக்கு புரியல. எனக்கு நீங்கள் இன்ஃபார்ம் பண்ணினா வரல இல்லை நீங்கள். நான் கூப்பிட்றேன் உங்களுக்கு வேலை இருக்குங்க, பார்த்துக்கோங்க. Sorry guys. Okay, any other questions? Oh my god, all these are getting recorded. Sorry.